The day my mother-in-law handed me a gift bag at my own anniversary dinner, I thought I had finally been accepted. I opened it at the table in front of everyone, and inside was a single piece of paper, a printed receipt, for a vacation she had booked using my credit card, without telling me, without asking me, and when I looked up at her she was smiling, not a nervous smile, not an apologetic smile. A smile that said she had done this before and she would do it again. My husband reached over and touched my hand, and I thought he was going to say something. He looked at his mother, looked back at me and said, "Let's not make this a big deal tonight, okay?" That was the night I understood. I was not their family, I was their resource. And they had been planning my downfall long before I had any idea the game had even started. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something, because I need you to stay with this story all the way to the end. Think about someone who smiled at you while they were hurting you, someone who used your trust like a door they could walk through whenever they needed something. Now think about the moment you finally saw it. How long did it take? How much did you give before you understood? Leave a comment below and tell me what hurts more, the betrayal itself or the fact that you were the last to see it. Because what Harper goes through in this story is going to stay with you. Subscribe if you believe that quiet truth is more powerful than a loud fight. This story is for people who know exactly how that feels. My name is Harper, and I want to start by telling you something that might make you feel a little uncomfortable before we even get into the story. I am not a dramatic person. I have never screamed at someone in a hallway. I have never thrown anything. I have never sent a long, angry text at 2 in the morning. I process pain slowly and quietly, the way water moves through rock. You do not see the damage right away, but eventually the rock gives way. That is important, because when you hear what was done to me, you are going to wonder why I stayed as long as I did. You are going to wonder why I did not fight back sooner. You are going to ask yourself how someone could be that patient, that generous, that slow to anger. I need you to understand that the people who hurt you the most are rarely the ones who scream at you. They are the ones who smile. They are the ones who say all the right things in public and do all the wrong things in private. They are the ones who make you feel like you are the problem every time you get close to seeing the truth. I was 29 when I married Daniel. He was 32. We met through mutual friends at a wedding. That always felt like a good sign to me, meeting at a wedding, starting something at a celebration. I thought it meant we were off to a good beginning. Daniel was charming in the easy, natural way that some people just are. He laughed easily. He remembered small things. He asked questions that made you feel interesting. I fell in love with the version of him he showed me in those first 2 years. The version who called me from the grocery store just to ask how my day was going. The version who drove an hour in the rain to bring me soup when I was sick before we even lived together. The version who told his friends I was the smartest person he had ever met. What I did not understand then was that Daniel had a version for everyone. He had a version for me, a version for his mother, a version for his friends, and a version he kept locked in a room I was never invited into until much later. His mother's name was Patricia. Patricia was the kind of woman who entered a room and immediately assessed every person in it. She was 61 when I first met her, elegant in the way that women who care deeply about appearances become elegant. She wore jewelry at family dinners. She corrected people's grammar without apology. She had opinions about everything and presented them as facts. From the very first meeting, I could feel Patricia evaluating me, not in a cruel, obvious way. In the careful, surgical way of someone who has already decided the verdict but wants to feel like they gave you a fair trial. She smiled at me that first evening and said I was lovely. She said Daniel had always had good taste. She held my hand with both of hers when we said goodbye and told me she hoped we would spend more time together. I went home that night feeling relieved. I told Daniel his mother seemed wonderful. He smiled and said she liked me, and that was a big deal because she was hard to impress. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 months after we got engaged. It was small. It was the kind of thing you file away and think you are probably overreacting to. Patricia asked Daniel if he had considered the prenuptial agreement. She said it in front of me at Sunday dinner with the same casual tone she would use to ask about the weather. She framed it as financial wisdom. She said all smart couples did it now. She looked at me while she said it, and her eyes were completely steady. Daniel said he would think about it. I did not say anything. I passed the bread basket and kept eating. After dinner in the car, I asked Daniel what he thought about what his mother had said. He told me not to read into it. He said his mother was just practical. He said she had watched friends go through bad divorces and she worried about him. He said it was not about me specifically. I said okay, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. We got married without a prenuptial agreement. Daniel never brought it up again, and neither did I, but Patricia brought it up one more time about 6 weeks before the wedding over the phone with Daniel. I was not supposed to hear that conversation. I heard it because I came home from work early and the bedroom door was half open and Daniel did not know I was there. I stood in the hallway and listened to him tell his mother that Harper was not after the money and that he wished she would just trust him. Then I heard him go quiet for a long time. Then I heard him say quietly, "I know, Mom, I hear you, I just think it will be fine." I went back downstairs, I put my bag on the counter, I started making dinner. I never told Daniel I heard that conversation, but I remembered it. We got married in late October. The wedding was beautiful. I had helped plan everything, worked with the vendors, managed the seating chart, handled the catering communication, coordinated the flowers. Patricia had opinions about every single element but contributed almost nothing financially. When I mentioned to Daniel that it might be nice if his parents helped with some of the costs, since his side of the guest list was significantly larger, he looked pained. He said his parents were not in a position to contribute much. He said they had expenses. He said it was not worth making an issue of. I paid for most of the wedding from my own savings. I had been working since I was 19. I had a good salary. I was careful with money. I had built something real. I paid. Patricia gave a speech at the reception that lasted 11 minutes. I timed it by accident because I was watching the clock on the wall behind her. She talked about Daniel's childhood, his accomplishments, his kindness, his potential. She mentioned me twice. Once at the beginning when she said she was happy to welcome me to the family. Once at the end when she said she hoped Daniel would always know how loved he was. She did not say she was happy to have me as a daughter. She said she was happy to welcome me, like I was a guest, like I was visiting. I smiled at her from across the table and raised my glass. She smiled back. Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered that she was emotional and that I should take it as a compliment. I smiled at him too. That was one of the last times I smiled without knowing exactly what I was smiling through. The first year of our marriage was genuinely happy in a lot of ways. We had a good home, we had routines we both loved. Daniel was attentive and kind most of the time. We laughed a lot. We traveled once to Portugal, which was a trip I had planned and mostly paid for because Daniel said he was between projects at work and his finances were a little tight. I did not think too much about that. He had explained that his freelance design work was inconsistent. I had a stable income. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. You carry more sometimes so your person can catch up. That felt right to me. What I did not see yet was that the carrying had a pattern. I carried, Daniel let me, Patricia approved. The financial pressure started quietly in the second year. Daniel mentioned once over breakfast that his parents were having a hard time with their mortgage. He said it in a casual way, like he was mentioning the news. He said they had taken on some debt and that the interest payments were getting difficult. He said he wished he could help them. I asked how much the shortfall was. He gave me a number. It was not small. I told him I was sorry to hear that and that we should think about whether there was anything we could do. He did not bring it up again for 3 weeks. Then one evening he mentioned he had transferred some money from our joint account to help cover his parents' mortgage payment. He said it like it was a small thing. He said he would replace it next month from a freelance check. The amount was $2,000. I sat with that for a moment. $2,000 from our joint account without a conversation, without asking, without even a text message heads up. Just done, already done. His tone was not apologetic. It was the tone of someone who expected agreement. I said that was a big decision to make without talking about it first. He said he knew I would want to help. He said I always wanted to. Help, he said he was just making it easier by handling it. I said I would have liked to be part of that decision. He said I was being a little rigid about money. I did not scream, I did not throw anything. I looked at him and said I was going to think about this and I would like us to talk more about it tomorrow. He said sure, tomorrow came. He acted like the conversation had never happened. I let it go, I should not have, but I did. The next 6 months introduced me to a version of my marriage I had not agreed to. I began to notice that our joint account was always lower than it should have been based on what we both put in. Daniel's freelance checks were late or smaller than expected or held up for reasons I did not fully understand. My direct deposit was consistent. The account drained anyway. I started keeping a private spreadsheet. I did not tell Daniel. I tracked every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer. I told myself I was just being organized. I told myself it was not a big deal. Within 4 months, I had documented 11 transfers from our joint account to a different account. The transfers ranged from $500 to $2,500. When I added them up, they totaled just over $14,000 in transfers I had not been told about. I sat at my desk at work staring at that number, $14,000, moved quietly piece by piece over 4 months. I did not cry. I think I had already started protecting myself by then without knowing it. I did not confront Daniel that night. I kept the spreadsheet. I kept watching. What happened next made everything worse and also clearer. Daniel's sister Renee called me one afternoon. Renee was 26 and I had always liked her, or at least I thought I had. She was warm in a surface way, easy to be around, not as guarded as Patricia. She called to ask if I had seen the family group chat. I told her I had not been added to any family group chat. She went quiet for just a moment. Then she said there must have been a mistake and she would have Daniel add me. I was never added. I asked Daniel about it that evening. He said the group chat was mostly old stuff and not very active and there was nothing interesting in it. He said he had asked Renee not to mention it because he did not want me to feel left out of things that were not relevant. Something moved through me that night. It was not anger exactly, it was recognition, the slow, cold kind. A group chat that I was deliberately not in. 11 months into a marriage where I had already given almost everything I had to give. I did not say much that night. I went to bed and I lay there in the dark and I thought about the hallway conversation I had overheard before the wedding. I thought about the receipt in the gift bag at the anniversary dinner. I thought about the transfers. I thought about the wedding speech. I thought about being called rigid about money. And then I did something I had never done in my marriage before. I made a plan. I need you to understand what kind of plan I mean. I did not plan cruelty. I did not plan punishment. I planned protection. I planned evidence. I planned truth. Those are not the same as revenge, even though they lead to very similar places. I called my college friend Dana the next day. Dana was a paralegal who had spent years working in family law before moving to a corporate practice. I had not talked to her about any of this. I had not talked to anyone about any of this. I told her everything in one long phone call while I sat in my car in a parking garage. I told her about the transfers, about the group chat, about the receipt at the anniversary dinner, about the prenuptial conversation. Dana was quiet through most of it. At the end, she said two things. She said, "Harper, you need to open a separate account that Daniel does not know about." And she said, "Do not confront him until you have more." I trusted her completely. I opened an account the next day. Over the next 2 months, I moved my direct deposit to the new account. I kept putting a small amount into the joint account each month so the pattern looked normal. But I stopped being the person who filled a leaking vessel without asking where the leak was coming from. I also started looking more carefully at our shared documents. We had a shared folder for household things, insurance papers, the mortgage documents for our home, bills. I had set it up myself when we moved in. I had never thought of it as a place where I might find something that would change everything. But that is exactly what it became. One evening in early spring, looking for a copy of our homeowner's insurance, I found a file I did not recognize. The name was just a string of numbers. I opened it. It was a property document, a deed, for a house I had never heard of in a town about an hour from where we lived. The deed was in Daniel's name and his mother's name, Patricia, the date on the document W. As 14 months ago, about 3 months after our wedding. I sat very still. I looked at the document for a long time. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to myself. I closed the folder and went downstairs and made dinner like nothing had happened. A house, a property bought in Daniel's name and his mother's name, 3 months after our wedding. Funded by money I did not know about from an account I had never seen in a deal I was never told about. I thought about the mortgage shortfall his parents had been dealing with. I thought about the 14,000 in transfers. I thought about the timing. I am not a financial expert, but I was putting the picture together piece by piece and the picture was getting harder to look at. I sent the document to Dana that night with 3 words. She called me in 20 minutes. She asked me 3 questions. Did I know anything about this property before tonight? Was my name anywhere on the document? Had I ever signed anything related to a second property? No, no, no. Dana said she needed to ask her colleague who specialized in marital property law to look at this, and could I send her everything I had? The spreadsheet, the document, all of it. I did. While I was waiting for Dana to get back to me, something happened that accelerated everything. It was something so small and so thoughtless that I almost missed it, but I caught it, and it broke the last wall between what I suspected and what I knew for certain. Patricia texted me. This was unusual. Patricia rarely texted me directly. We communicated at dinners, at holidays, in the group settings that Daniel arranged. For her to text me directly was rare enough that when I saw her name on my screen, my stomach tightened immediately. The text said, "Harper, would you be able to bring the joint account card on Saturday? Daniel said you're handling the expenses for the party." That was the whole message. I did not respond right away. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. I thought about what she was not saying. I thought about what she assumed. I thought about Daniel having already told her yes, that Harper would handle it without asking me, without mentioning there was a party, without giving me any information. And then I noticed something. The text had been sent to me, yes, but in the thread preview, I could see it was forwarded from another message. Patricia had meant to forward it somewhere else and accidentally sent it to me instead. The original message, which I could see in the chain, was from Daniel. Daniel had written, "Mom, just ask Harper for the joint card directly. She won't question it if it comes from you." I read that sentence 5 times. She won't question it if it comes from you. Not I'll talk to Harper about it, not Harper said we can use it, not I need to check with Harper. She won't question it if it comes from you. This was a plan, a deliberate, coordinated plan, to use me as a resource while keeping me too in the dark to push back, to route requests through his mother because they had figured out that I was more likely to comply when the ask came from family, when I wanted to keep the peace, when I did not want to seem difficult or rigid. They had studied me, they had mapped my softness and built a strategy around it. I put my phone down, I was so calm that it frightened me, that cold, clear calm that comes when you have finally run out of hope that you were wrong. I texted Patricia back. I said, "What party, Patricia?" I sent it exactly like that, no warmth, no punctuation flourish, just 2 words and a question mark. She did not respond for 6 hours. When she finally did, she said there must have been a misunderstanding and she would talk to Daniel. She said sorry for the confusion. I did not respond, I called Dana instead. Dana had good news and complicated news. The good news was that her colleague had reviewed the property document and there were legal arguments available to me about marital asset concealment. The complicated news was that building a case would take time and documentation, but Dana said the text exchange I had just described was significant. A documented pattern of coordinating to access marital funds without consent was not small. She asked if I was safe, I said yes. She asked if I wanted to move forward, I said yes. She told me to do 3 things: stop putting anything into the joint account, do not tell Daniel what I knew, and document every communication from this point forward. I did all 3. What came next was the strangest chapter of everything, because I had to continue living normally inside a marriage I now knew was built on a lie while quietly building the documentation that would eventually set me free. I went to dinners, I smiled, I answered questions about work and plans and whether Daniel and I had thought about children. I was pleasant at his birthday and helpful when Patricia needed something printed and ready to hold a pen at a family event. Everything was exactly as it had always been. Inside, I was a completely different person. I was done. I was already gone. I just had to wait for the right moment. The right moment came from a direction I did not expect. Daniel's brother Marcus was 38 and had spent most of his adult life in a quiet battle with his family. He was the one who did not call regularly, who showed up to holidays for an hour and left early, who Daniel described as difficult and Patricia described as ungrateful. I had never paid much attention to Marcus. He was polite to me when we crossed paths, and that was mostly it. Marcus called me at work on a Thursday morning. He asked if I could meet him for coffee. He said it was important. He said he had been wanting to talk to me for months and was not sure how to approach it, but he had heard something recently that made him feel he had to. We met that Friday at a coffee shop near my office. Marcus sat across from me and held his cup with both hands and looked like a man who was about to tell someone a thing they did not want to hear. He told me that 6 months after my wedding, his mother had called him and told him that she and Daniel had handled the financial situation and that he did not need to worry. He did not know what that meant at the time. He had assumed it was about his parents' mortgage debt. Then he had recently overheard his mother on the phone with someone, and she had mentioned Harper's name in the context of the house, and that was what had prompted him to call me. He said, "Harper, I do not know exactly what is going on, but I know my family, and I know when they are protecting themselves at someone else's expense." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. He said he had found it in his parents' house when he visited last month, and he had taken a photo of it on his phone and printed it because it had my name on it. I unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten note in Patricia's handwriting dated about 8 months ago. It was a list. At the top it said plan for H, below that were bullet points. Use the joint account for the Millbrook property maintenance. Pull back mortgage assistance to avoid paper trail. Make sure H does not see the Redfin listing. Keep D's name and M's name on the deed only. H was me, D was Daniel, M was Patricia herself. I sat there looking at a handwritten plan with my initial at the top, written by my mother-in-law 8 months ago, outlining how to use me financially while making sure I never found out about a property they had purchased together. Marcus watched my face. He said, "I'm sorry, Harper, I should have said something earlier, I just didn't know how bad it was." I thanked him, I folded the paper and put it in my bag. I drove to Dana's office directly from the coffee shop. What I had now was no longer just a spreadsheet. I had a forwarded text that proved coordination. I had a property deed that proved a concealed marital asset. I had a handwritten note that proved deliberate, planned financial deception using my identity and my accounts. Dana looked at everything laid out on her desk and said to me, "This is more than most people find in situations like this. This is a pattern, this is a system, you did not imagine any of it." I had not imagined any of it, I had not been dramatic, I had not been paranoid, I had not been rigid about money. I had been used carefully, deliberately, by people who smiled at me. Dana connected me with her colleague, a family law attorney named Claire, who was direct and practical and did not waste time with anything that did not matter. Claire reviewed everything and told me three things clearly. First, the concealed property would likely be considered a marital asset in part, given the documented funding source. Second, the pattern of fund transfers from the joint account without consent was significant in a legal sense. Third, the handwritten note and the text message were the kind of evidence that changed the nature of conversations. Claire asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted out. I told her I wanted what was mine. I told her I did not want revenge. I wanted truth and I wanted to leave. She said that was exactly the right answer. We filed the initial documentation quietly on a Wednesday. Daniel did not know. Patricia did not know. Renee did not know. I went home that evening and made dinner and sat across from Daniel and asked about his day and listened to him talk and thought about how little the person in front of me resembled the man I had believed I was marrying. The papers were served to Daniel 3 days later, at 10 in the morning. While he was at a coffee shop he went to every week at the same time. His face when he called me was not the face of someone blindsided. It was the face of someone who had always known this moment might come and had hoped the calculations would hold long enough to avoid it. He said, "Harper, this is not necessary, we can talk about tea." His. I said, "We are talking about it, this is how we're talking about it now." He asked me if I had a lawyer. I said yes. He asked who. I said that information was available through the documentation. He asked me to come home so we could talk in person. I said I was home. He said I knew what he meant. I said, "Daniel, I found the property deed. I have the transfers documented. I have the text from your mother. I have the handwritten note your mother wrote with my initial at the top. I want you to understand that there is nothing left to explain away." The silence on the line was something I will never forget. It was not the silence of someone thinking. It was the silence of someone realizing the walls had already come down and they had been standing inside a ruin while thinking they were still protected. He said that was never supposed to be used against you. And I said it was never supposed to be found. There was nothing left after that. I told him Claire would be in contact with his representation. I told him I hoped we could keep this simple and honest because complicating it would only cost both of us more time and more money. Then I hung up. Patricia called me 17 minutes later. I did not answer. She called 4 more times that evening. I did not answer any of them. She left a voicemail on the last call. In the voicemail, she said she wanted to explain herself. She said things were taken out of context. She said she loved me like a daughter. She said she hoped I would give the family a chance to sit down together and talk before I made any decisions that could not be undone. She said she loved me like a daughter. I had been in this family for 3 years and 6 months. I had paid for the wedding. I had covered the mortgage transfers. I had been used as a piggy bank for a property deal with my name nowhere on the deed. And now, when everything had collapsed, I was loved like a daughter. I saved the voicemail for my file. In the weeks that followed, I watched the different reactions carefully. Renee texted me 3 times. The first text said she had no idea what was going on. The second text said she hoped I was okay. The third text, which came after she presumably spoke to her mother, said that I had always seemed like someone who would handle things with grace, and she hoped I would not do anything that would damage the family permanently. I read that third text several times. Handle things with grace. That was the language of someone asking me to absorb damage quietly and move on. That was the language of someone who knew more than they were saying, who had chosen a side and was trying to dress that choice up as a compliment. I did not respond to any of Renee's texts. Marcus called to check on me. I told him I was okay. I told him that what he had done by telling me the truth was one of the most important things anyone had done for me during this period of my life. He said he was sorry it had come to this. I said he did not need to be sorry for anything he had not done. My own family rallied around me in a way I had not expected. My mother, who had been quietly skeptical of Daniel from early on, came to stay with me for 2 weeks. My older brother took time off work to help me sort through the financial paperwork. My best friend from childhood flew in for a long weekend and slept on my couch and made me eat actual meals when I was running on nothing but the clarity of having finally made a decision. I want to be honest about something. I was not okay. I was quietly, deeply not okay. Not because I wanted to stay in the marriage. I did not want to stay. I was not okay because I was grieving. Not Daniel specifically, not the marriage as it actually was, but the marriage I had believed I was in. The version of Daniel who drove an hour in the rain to bring me soup. The future I had planned. The family I had tried to become part of. The years I had given to something that had been quietly, deliberately draining me from the inside. Grief for a lie is still grief, do not let anyone tell you otherwise. The legal process was not fast, but it was thorough. Claire was steady and very good. The opposing side initially tried to argue that the property purchase had nothing to do with marital funds. Claire had the transfer records, they adjusted. They tried to argue that the joint account withdrawals were standard household expenses. I had 14 months of itemized records with no corresponding household costs. They adjusted again. Patricia tried once to insert herself into the legal process through a letter from her own attorney, claiming that the property was purchased with personal funds that predated the marriage. Claire dissected that claim in 3 pages. The letter was not mentioned again. The property became a central piece of the settlement. The marital asset argument was solid. Daniel could fight it, but fighting it would cost more than the property was worth in legal fees, and Claire had sure he understood this clearly. The settlement took several months to finalize, but when it was done, it reflected the full financial picture of what I had actually contributed and what I had actually lost. I walked out of that process with more than I walked in terms of financial protection. More importantly, I walked out with my name on my own life again. There was one final moment I want to tell you about because it matters to the shape of this story. About 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized, I was at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning. I had my coffee, my canvas bag, I was buying tomatoes. It was an ordinary, quietly happy moment of the kind I had. Patricia was there, she was maybe 30 feet away. She saw me the same moment I saw her. We looked at each other across a row of produce stands and people walking with strollers and dogs on leashes. She took one step toward me, then she stopped. I turned and walked into my house. I did not shake, I did not feel my heart rate change. I did not have anything left to say and nothing I needed to hear. I paid for the tomatoes and walked the other direction and felt something so clean and quiet that it took me a moment to name it. Peace, that is what it was. The specific kind of peace that comes from having fought a battle correctly, not loudly, not with a speech, not with a confrontation designed to make the other person feel small, but with documentation, patience, evidence, and the decision to finally stop carrying people who had only ever been planning which parts of you to take next. I have been asked by more than one person who knew the whole story whether I feel angry, whether I hate Daniel, whether I hate Patricia. Here is what I tell them honestly. The anger came and it was real and it lasted longer than I expected. But it is a heavy thing and I am done carrying heavy things for people who were never going to carry anything for me. What I feel now is something more like clarity, the kind that only comes from the other side of something hard. And if you are somewhere in the middle of something that looks like this, if you are in the part where you are still filing things away and trying not to show what you know, if you are still choosing peace over confrontation because you are hoping it will work out, I want to say one thing to you directly. You are not wrong for how long you stayed. You are not wrong for how much you gave. You are not wrong for wanting to believe the best of people you loved. But there is a point, and you will feel it if you have not already, where protecting yourself is not a betrayal of the relationship. It is the most honest thing you can do, because the moment you start protecting yourself is the moment you stop lying to yourself about what is really happening. Harper did not scream. Harper did not perform her pain for an audience. Harper built a spreadsheet. Harper answered a text with 2 words. Harper walked away from a farmer's market with her coffee and her tomatoes and her life. And that is all I am going to say about that. Except one more thing. If someone has ever made you feel like you were too much and not enough at the same time, that is not confusion. That is control, and it does not belong to you. You can put it down. I did. If this story stayed with you, I want you to sit with one question before you scroll away. Think about all the times you chose silence over confrontation because you wanted to keep the peace. Think about all the times someone mistook your patience for permission. Harper's story is about one woman who finally stopped filling a space that was never going to be hers. If that hit something real for you, leave a comment below and tell me what part of this you needed to hear today. And if you know someone who is carrying more than they should, send this to them. Because sometimes the most important thing someone can hear is that they are not paranoid, they are not dramatic, and they are not alone.